Hi, this is Mike Tierney, Superintendent of Schools, and this is Donna Basting, the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum, Instruction, and Technology. We're here today to discuss the reopening plans that we've made, and we're here to talk about the survey. We're going to talk about all of the things that we have gotten questioned about over the course of the last week or so. Before we do that, I just want to take a few minutes to review some of the concerns that you've had. And first of all, I want to acknowledge the frustrations that you were all feeling and the ambiguity of this entire situation. It is hard to plan when things are moving and uncertain. And I do realize, and I feel that you do not have all the answers that you want to make the best decisions for your children. And we will continue to update you with information as we move along. The goal today in our plan, is to try to give you as much information to make an important educational decision. And that educational decision is, are you going to have remote learning for your children, or are you going to have in-person learning for your children? And we want to answer all of those questions today, or as many of those questions as we can answer, because some of them are still unanswerable. So I hope that you were all safe from the storm that we had last week and that power is restored. The school was also closed for 4 days last week because of that. So like I had said, the initial goal is to explain the systems. And our ultimate goal in the reopening committee, our ultimate charge in the reopening committee, was to align to 3 different guidance plans. The first guidance plan was from the New York State Education Department. They had sent us a guidance pages that we would need to follow in order for us to open. The second major guidance was from the New York State Department of Health. And the third piece of guidance was from the CDC. So we're looking at these 3 pieces as we developed our reopening plan. We've established 8 different committees that have 8 different goals, and those committees at times get together and report out, and those committees at times meet individually and even meet at the building level. So what you have at our website is a culmination. It's not a culmination really, it's in progress, the working plan that we have for parents for each of the schools. Because of the geography, because of the layout, and because of the student capacity, each school's plan has to be a little different. So part of the State Education Department's charge is to come up with 3 different models. The first model would be full in-person learning. Now, we all want students here. We would love to have everyone in every day. But by no means can we do that at this time and follow all of the guidance that we have been given. So what we have tried to do from a reopening committee perspective is to bring in as many students as possible the most days we can. So we were and are trying to establish a model where we could have our K-8 students return to school with cohorts, meaning small groups, smaller groups than a normal class. So instead of 25 or 26 students, we would have 14 or 15 students. In some cases, we could have a big class, but we would also have to have in a bigger classroom that could accommodate those additional students. And in a cohort, those students stay together all day, where they don't travel and don't move from class to class. Actually, the opposite happens. The teachers would move from class to class. And kind of a normal elementary model where we would have less movement of students and more movement of teachers to the classes and through there. The second model would be a hybrid model. In our hybrid model, we would have students come on an A group, come on Monday and Thursday. B group would come on Tuesday and Friday. And Wednesday would be a fully remote day where teachers would do some professional development, they would do some teaching, and they would do some planning for their remote sections that they would be offering and teaching. And then the third model is full remote, With full remote, all classes would be online. There would be this year additional face-to-face instruction where that didn't occur last year in many of the K-2 classes. We didn't have face-to-face instruction. This year, every student would get a Chromebook. There would be expectations of daily face-to-face instruction with your teachers in all of the grades K through 12. So what we have to look at is which model is best for us. And at the current stage, we are trying to have our K-8 students come back full in attendance every day. We've reduced the buses, or actually we've increased our buses to double the capacity. So where we had 10 bus runs at Wingdale, we would now have 20 bus runs at Wingdale. Where we had 10 bus runs at Dover, we would now have 20 bus runs at Dover, so that every student would have their own seat on the bus. This does not guarantee social distancing on the bus, but it does guarantee that every student would have their own bus who could. They would all be to wear masks, and the students that couldn't wear masks for various health reasons would have to keep socially distanced. The only people who we would want to sit together on the bus would be family members. So in the middle school, high school, it might be a little bit different. If we have a full return in the middle high school, again, part of the reason we need this survey and this information is to see what percentage of parents are going to drive or let their students drive to school. So how many buses do we need, and how those runs will work out in the middle school and high school. But I can tell you this. There will be times, and there may be times, where students will have to sit together until the first few students are dropped off. As long as they're wearing masks and we keep the air circulating, it should be okay to do. However, we would like to have one seat per student with families sitting together on the buses. Given the three models, regardless, each student will be getting a Chromebook. We're not going to wait for that, because we know even if we have a full return for our young students, there may be times where we are going to have to shut down the school, whether we have positive cases of the virus, or if the spikes reach 9%, the governor closes down. We want to be ready, and we want our technology to be ready, and we want remote education to be as close to as in-house education as we can possibly have it, within terms of units, learning targets, and assessments. With that said, I just want to review a few of our health and wellness pieces before we get into more detailed questions. Every morning, and this is a critical piece from the health department in our meetings, every morning parents are going to have to help us and do verification that your child has done a complete health screening. You will be getting a school reach call every morning, so will every staff member, so will I, so will Mrs. Basting. And on that survey, it will give a list of symptoms that you may or may not have. And it's going to ask you, do you have any of the following symptoms that could be related to the virus? And you are going to have to say yes or no, check for fever, check for headache, check for nausea. All of the symptoms will be listed on that phone call. And you're going to have to provide that health screening. And we're going to record that. And we're going to make sure that every student has done a health screening before they've come in. The students who have not done a health screening, we do not have a record for a health screening being done at home. We will call those students in, and we will make sure that we do a health screening with them prior to, or at least during, first period of the day, so that we can check and make sure that nobody is coming in with COVID-like symptoms. The second thing we will do is we will have periodic checks of students or classes, where we will call a class down, or we will actually go to a class with some of our healthcare workers, and we will do checks we will do random checks to make sure that everybody does not have a fever and is symptom free. And that's it's a secondary measure, but that's one of the things that we want to do. We're also going to emphasize and train everybody on the best possible hygiene practices. Obviously, you've heard them on the news, but we really have to teach our young people about face coverings and Everyone is going to be expected to wear face coverings on the bus and in school, other than when they are eating or taking a mask break. Everyone should be using hand hygiene, washing their hands, having plenty of alcohol-based hand sanitizers to clean their hands as often as needed, and maintain social distancing in the classrooms and in the hallways as best we can. There will be no visitations allowed in school unless it is absolutely necessary for the schools to function. And to the greatest extent possible, we will not have visitors in the school. I am recommending to the board that we are going to have 8 additional custodians. 4 will be in one for each building, added to each building during the day to do additional wipe downs and cleanings. Looking at all the door handles, all the high visible areas that need to be washed, as well as 4 more custodians to the night crews to do the deep cleanings, to do the electrostatic fogging, and all of the pieces that need to make sure that everything is safe. Some of the other things that we are continuing to look at are the ventilation systems. We've contracted with a mechanical engineer. That person is looking at the air ratio and how the ventilations are working with our air handlers. He or she may prescribe that we have more ventilation and exhaust fans going through the halls and having things blow out the windows. And he'll give us his recommendations by building as soon as he completes that. I've also ordered a tent for each of the schools, a 30 by 60 tent, so that students can go to those tents when it's nice outside. There could be classes in those tents. There can be meal breaks in those tents, mask breaks in those tents, and we will rotate their use. But having that fresh air, getting that mask break, being able to have a place where they can go and socially distance and have some lunch and at least talk openly with each other, with some distance, would be nice to do, and that would happen at the start of school. And obviously, we want more fresh air. So any ways that we can do that, and we can have the classrooms with more air. We don't want the air blowing around, so we don't want box fans in every classroom blowing air around or sneezes. We want it to exhaust, and we want to refresh as best we can. In terms of closing school, it's a very difficult question to field at this point. We're continually working on it. I don't know what the exact measures will be. A part of it is we will be responsible to report any positive testing or positive cases of COVID-19 if and when we have them in the schools to the health department. We are still looking into whose roles and responsibilities with contact tracing will happen. The school will play a role, the health department will play a role, and we will have definite answers to that, and we will share that with you prior to opening up. One of the things that I haven't gotten an answer for, and I can't give you an answer yet, is when and if we will close school if we have a teacher or a student test positive for COVID-19. And that is, we're continuing to work on that answer with the Board of Health, with the other superintendents of schools, and with the Board of Education and our reopening committee, because that's one of the most important things that we need to know and that parents need to know, so that they can make those decisions and that we can decide what we're going to do if and when we have those cases. So at this time, I'm going to take some of the questions that Mrs. Basting has gathered from parents, from students, and from faculty, and we're going to discuss what we can to give you as much information as we can.
So, Mr. Tierney, first off, while you may have said this in the introduction, I'm thinking more about being a little bit more specific. Could you tell me what the scheduling model is for each building at this point in time?
Okay. At this point in time, at grades K through 8, we are trying to have every student in every day. Now, there are some exceptions to that. Part of the reason we gave out the survey this week was to see how many parents and children do not want to send their students to school. Because quite frankly, if every parent sends their children to school, we could not do that model. We do not have the classroom space to socially distance. We would not have the class sizes necessary to run that model. So if 20% of the student body decides to stay home, then we would most likely have enough class space. We would reduce the class sizes by adding some positions, and we would try to get class sizes between 15 and 18 students, depending on the size of the class. And again, in some cases, when we have a larger classroom, we could fit a larger group of students. So in all of those cases, the middle school, the elementary school, and the and Wingdale Elementary School, we would have smaller classes every day, all the students. That is currently what we are trying to do. In the high school, however, that can't happen with the number of students we have. In the high school, we will be on a modified or a hybrid schedule, I think is the term we are using. And with that model, we will have students in 2 days a week on A group and a B group, where one group will be in on Monday and Thursday, and the B group would be in on Tuesday and Friday, and everybody would be working remotely from home on Wednesday. So just to sum it up, in the high school, you would be in school 2 days a week. You would be doing remote learning 3 days a week on our current model.
Why are we trying to get the students in so soon? Why not wait?
Well, that's a tough decision. The reason we don't want to wait is we want our children in school to learn the technology. We want them exposed to the Chromebooks and how to use the Chromebooks effectively. We want them to establish a relationship with their teachers in order for them to get off to a good start. Those are very important aspects. The other one of the most important aspects, I believe, is the importance of reading and writing for our young people, especially the K-3 students who really need to have those formative years in learning how to read and write as quickly as possible. And it's also healthy for them to get into the classrooms and start learning and moving forward to be productive in our classes. We know that we're not going to be as good remotely as we would be in person. And in-person instruction is our ultimate goal. We miss the kids, we want the kids, but again, I assure you, we want it to be safe. And at any time, this could change. We could have a spike in the infection rate. We're seeing it in some of the other states right now. We could have a spike locally, and we could have a spike in school. And we've seen it in different outbreaks where when there was a case, it did and it could spread quickly when people were not socially distant, when people were not wearing masks, and when people were not using proper hand and respiratory hygiene.
Just another point with bringing them back into the building, the students, when they left in the spring, learned at very different rates. And what we're trying to do is establish a benchmark. Where are they now? So we can move them forward based on where they are, as opposed to where we anticipated that they would be at this point in time. So continuing with the questions, what is the day going to look like at each building for a student?
Well, I think the day is going to look like a normal school day. The students are going to be assessed on how they did last year. We're going to try to find the gaps in instruction and the gaps in performance. And we're going to try to level that off as best we can moving forward. Part of our focus with professional development this year and remote learning will be how to better assess students on the learning targets, how to increase our expectations, because last year, quite frankly, it was new to us. We weren't ready to go to remote learning. This year, we will have a few days of professional development. We've already done some additional professional development for Wingdale and Dover last year, along with having a full-time technology teacher that's going to help our teachers who are new at this to gain their capacity. So in-school instruction should be smaller classes. Hopefully it'll be more direct instruction with those students. Obviously, we're not returning to the same school that we left in March 13th. It's very different with the masks, with the mask breaks, with the social distancing. Excuse me, there's not going to be the reading groups where they're all together, and we're going to have to adjust to these pieces where we're so used to being close on the carpet in the elementary schools. That's not going to be able to happen anymore. So some of these things are going to have to be done through the smart boards. Some of these things are going to have to be done with a plexiglass wall between the two, because we are going to need to be next to each other when we do some assessments, but we have to do it safely. So it's very hard for me to sketch out all of the differences and all of the changes, because we're going to evolve as well and look at those pieces.
So basically, there'll be limited movement for the students. The teachers will be traveling from room to room, and we'll be limiting the cohorts as much as possible from moving from place to place.
Yeah, especially in the middle school and the high school. We're trying to put all of the ninth graders into 5 or 6 classrooms that are near each other. So we usually attach it to a science wing. We say the biology class for the ninth graders because that's what most of them are taking. So we have the biology class, and then we would have the English, math, science, social studies, and perhaps foreign language and a special education room. And those 6 or 7 classrooms would be together, so that when the teachers move, they don't have to move very far, and the students will stay in the same classroom. They'll have their same desk, and the teachers will move from room to room. Now that can happen for the most part in the middle school, and it can happen for the most part in the high school, and there will be times we're going to try to get them outside for physical education, for some of the music programs, for mask breaks, and for meals. Even the meals there will be no cafeteria as we know it. For the most part, meals will either be delivered to the tent, where students can go to the tent when it's their rotation, or they will be delivered to the classrooms, and the students can eat in the classrooms. And we can, another reason why we need the additional custodians is to make sure that we do that cleanup right away after lunch happens and we have that rotation, because we're providing one of the other pieces we did apply for and get is we are able to provide free lunch and free breakfast to every student in the school district. So that will be in a lot of ways very nice for our parents and our students. But in collaboration with this, everybody will get a free meal that wants one, both for breakfast and lunch every day. And that is also included with our students on modified schedules, on hybrid schedules. We can feed them on days that they are home as well. And we're working out the details for that on our foods committee.
Let's go back to physical education and music classes. How are they different from all of the other classes?
Well, again, that's an area that's going to have to evolve. In the guidance documents, the singing and playing of instruments is recommended that it's 12 feet in distance. So each person has to be 12 feet apart, rather than the normal social distancing of 6 feet apart when they're playing an instrument or when they're singing. It's going to have to be 12 feet apart. So we're going to see what that means. I think initially I can safely say we're not going to have full orchestra at any time soon, or we're not going to have large groups singing in a crowded room, but we're going to have to break those into smaller groups. We're going to have to spread out and use our geography, so to speak, and our sunshine and our outside as best we can to try to have that big area of social distancing and still be able to have the valued music education that this district has always wanted.
Just a few other points on the meals. I know that through the committee work, we decided that there will be no a la carte meals and no salad bars for safety reasons. Lunch choices will be made in the morning so that the cafeteria can prepare for them during the school day. And if students are learning remotely, they can still have meals. They would just come to each school, each of the 3 buildings will have meals available for them to pick up.
We're still looking into the possibility of sending meals home. So, for instance, if you're part of the A group and you come in on Mondays and Thursdays, you would be able to take a meal home at the end of the day on A day for your Tuesday meal, and then, or actually for 2 meals. You would have, if you were A day, you would have your Tuesday and Wednesday meals could be prepackaged and ready for you to take home those days that you want to take them home. And vice versa with the B group, they would get it on Friday. They would get one for the Monday, and they would get for the 2-day period, the Tuesday and Wednesday, that they would be out as well. So we're still working out the details of that, but we are going to try to send students home with food as best we can, as often as we can, so that everybody gets the breakfast and lunch that they're entitled to.
Let's go a little bit more into the safety precautions that are being taken at the schools. I know that you went into a little bit the reduced class sizing to allow for social distancing, the face coverings. When will students need to wear face coverings?
Okay. Well, in terms of face covering, we are going to have every student who can to wear a face covering as much of the day as they possibly can. And I think it's going to be hard at first, especially for our young people, to build up the stamina to have a mask on all the time. So they might have to take breaks every half an hour. They might have to take breaks every 10 minutes at first and work that up. And that's going to be a slow process. But they will have to wear a mask on the bus in order for us to have a safe transportation to school. They're going to be provided a mask if they don't have one and asked to put it on. And then during the day, we're going to have them wear a mask as often as possible. And if they can't wear a mask, we need to have them socially distant. Part of the what we're doing with some students have respiratory issues. They have asthma, they have breathing problems where they cannot physically wear a mask, and we're going to have to provide them with accommodations. It might be a physical barrier. It might be that they're not wearing masks, so we have to move the desks a little bit further, provide them with additional ventilation or additional breaks, so that if they are wearing masks, they can take more breaks, and so that they can keep their oxygen levels to where they need to be. So all of these we're working on them. We're going to be collecting that information from parents. Some parents have already sent in some of those requests, and it would be something called a 504 accommodation to make sure that we can do that. But the expectation is that all students will be wearing a face covering at all times, unless they are taking a mask break or unless they're having a meal.
How about during instruction, when the teacher is teaching and they are at their desks?
We've talked about this a lot, and we hope to evolve that in the beginning we're going to ask people to wear their masks. But I think as we get comfortable with our systems, and as we get everybody regimented, when students are socially distanced, which means at least 6 feet away from each other, and they're not speaking or they're not yelling out answers, or they're doing something that's a little bit more like reading a piece from the Chromebook that they've been assigned. They're doing some editing, something that I would call passive learning, or something that they're not actively engaged with in terms of speaking and communicating. I would hope that they could take a mask break at that time, either just take it down so that they can breathe, so that we don't have to stop what we're doing in order to move forward. But I think that's going to evolve, and everyone's going to have a different comfort level with that. So those are some of the things, and that's some of the ambiguity that people want to hear. And what I'm saying and trying to give you as much information as possible is we hope to evolve to that it's a respectable use, and that we try to give people some independence in how they and when they take mask breaks. But at this point in our process, we're going to expect that everybody have a mask on at all times with scheduled breaks based on need.
Some parents are questioning how the hallway traffic will be modified. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Well, each of the plans, I have to give the principals credit because they have looked at the details of each of the plans, and they have separate entrance ways and exit ways for the different buses and the different grades. There will be traffic patterns that will be established. I don't know that there will be one-way halls, but there will be, you'll be expected to go on the right side all the way over to the right, on the left side all the way over to the left. Again, high school, middle school, the traffic patterns are going to be greatly reduced for most of the time because we might have one or two classes that are out or traveling at a time. We're not going to have all of the classes traveling at a time. We're going to have the classes traveling as needed to go to physical education or to go to music or to go to get their meals and go outside for a break. But we're not going to have the whole school outside at any one time, probably 2 or 3 classes at most to keep socially distanced. So each of the building's plans is a little bit different, and if you look at those plans, they're mapped out there. But the overall emphasis is to reduce traffic as much as possible and try to keep it to a minimum. And this is going to have some impact on students' ability for socialization and for interacting with each other. So there are going to be those cohorts are going to get to really know each other very well. Good or bad, it's going to be a little bit like family.
Well, we're hoping that all of the students see the seriousness of this situation. We know and we expect that some students are not going to follow the rules. What happens in that case?
There have been some questions. One question, what will be the discipline if my kindergartner doesn't wear his or her mask? And obviously it's going to be different at different age groups. We're going to do our best to teach them early on, but we are going to insist and reinforce as best we can that the masks will have to be worn. If it's someone who's just being disrespectful and doesn't want to wear a mask because they don't want to wear a mask, then they've made a choice. And that choice is they're not going to be part of the school and they're not going to participate in social distancing, wearing masks, and practicing good respiratory and hand hygiene. And we're going to have to enforce that as best we can with some tolerance for age and some tolerance for ability. Again, some people can't wear masks, and you might give me a call or might call one of the principals and said, there's a student on the bus who's not wearing a mask. And yes, that could be true. But and we can't tell you that there's a medical reason because that would be violating that student and their family's rights. But that might happen. In some circumstances, that's going to happen. And we're going to do the best we can to maintain social distancing and keep people as safe as possible.
You spoke a little bit about screening and doing the screening at home. Can you tell me a little bit about how a student will be screened here if for some reason they were not screened at home? And this would also go with staff.
Yeah, every morning you're going to get a phone call, and we're going to ask parents, and we are going to train parents as to what that health screening will look like. But the parents who do not, for whatever reason, do not get the call, do not answer the phone, we will compare the list of parents who answered, yes, my child does have symptoms, they're staying home. We'll have a list of no, my child does not have symptoms, does not have a fever, they come to school, and then we'll have a group of students in the middle who have not responded. And that list will come up, and each of the lists will be given to our nurses. We are adding, I'm recommending that the board add 3 additional healthcare aides. And those healthcare aides, along with the nurses, are going to provide those safety checks and screenings, but hopefully by first period of each day. And as we call home and say, please remember to do your screenings because we want them screened before they get on the bus. And that's something that we're going to try to insist that everybody get into the habit of doing, because talking to the health department, they were insistent that this was the #1 thing to keep our community safe that we could do, is to do that health screening and make sure we don't have any of the symptoms and don't send students or teachers or staff to schools with those symptoms. And if we can avoid that, we will be in a much better place and we'll be much safer.
What happens if a child or staff member gets to school and isn't feeling well and gets a fever or shows some symptoms of COVID?
Yeah. Anybody who shows symptoms of COVID-19 should be sent to the office, to the nurse's office. And in the nurse's office, we have established the guidelines that they are going to have to do a safety check. We've also created a isolation room in each of the schools. So if a student has symptoms, say they have a fever over 100.4, I think it's 100
Yes.
right now, they would be showing testing positive for COVID-like symptoms. They would be brought to the isolation room. In the isolation room, we would have a healthcare aide monitoring them. That healthcare aide would have a gown, would have N95 masks, would be able to deal with that child's healthcare issues, and we would ask that the parents come pick that child up as soon as possible. And this is an issue that we need to address and we need to talk about. I need to ask parents to do some planning, because I do know in some cases we've asked parents to come and pick up their children, and they're lack of a better, they're an hour away, or they're an hour and 15 minutes away because they commute to work. And we're going to need you to have somebody available or share, availability with another family who could come and pick up that student or your child with COVID-19 symptoms as quickly as possible, because we don't want students with those symptoms to be in school for as little time as possible. And those isolation rooms are being checked. Part of the mechanical engineer I talked about, we're going to check to see that that air is constantly being refreshed and recharged, as well as the classrooms. And that we do a deep cleaning after a student who has COVID-19 symptoms is in that room. We get rid of the gowns, we clean the classroom, we clean that room along with CDC guidelines. And then start again.
Okay, going back to transportation just for a minute. Parents were asking what the arrival times were, and just to give you some information on that, Dover Middle School and Dover High School, the arrival time will be 7:15 and the dismissal will be at 2 p.m. At Dover Elementary School, the arrival time will be 8 a.m. and dismiss at 2:45 p.m. And at Wingdale Elementary, the students will arrive at 8:45 and dismiss at 3:30. Since there will be an increase in the number of students who are being driven to school, how will the district address that?
Well, I think we're going to have to be patient, especially in the first couple of weeks, as we will probably have a slow start. We guarantee you we will not bring every grade in the first day that school is open. We might bring in the kindergarten and the third grade because they're going into new buildings, and the sixth grade. We'll bring them in, acclimate them, and then maybe another group. So we're still working on our plans to open and have what we would call a slow start to bring students in. We're working on a 3-tiered bus system now, where we're doubling our bus runs at Wingdale and Dover to make sure that everybody has a seat, and it makes sure. So part of that is figuring that out and figuring out the times, because not only when you think about it, not only are the runs going to change, but now instead of dismissing or coming into school, just think about bringing students into school. We're going to probably unload 3 buses at a time. We cannot unload all the buses at one time like we were used to doing when we had 10 buses. Now we're going to be probably bringing in three buses, unloading them, and bringing in 3 more, unloading them, and that's going to take time. So although we're giving you the definitive start times and the definitive dismissal times, I think the start times could be delayed, and you're going to have to be a little patient at the beginning of the year, so that we can work out the bugs and we can come up with the best routes, so that we can shorten those routes, because we're going to have 20 buses instead of 10. We should be able to shorten those routes, but we're not sure how it's going to go. And we also want to provide traffic patterns for parents who are going to come in and drop off their students. So those will be in the plans. Those will be communicated to you by your building principals, because those are very specific directions and where students will go who are dropped off versus where students will go when the buses come in.
Just a note from the Department of Health that we cannot have hand sanitizers on the buses because it's flammable. So students can't have that in their backpacks. Bus drivers or monitors on the bus won't be having that either. If the elementary and middle schools need to go to a hybrid schedule, and for the high school students that are learning remotely, what does that day look like?
Well, I think parents had some exposure to what those days looked like last year, but there will be a greater emphasis on remote learning, or even the hybrid model for the elementary schools. Again, it would be, I don't want to get repetitious, but it would be in school 2 days a week on a hybrid model, K-8, and it would be at home 3 days a week, depending on which group you would be in. We will try very hard to have families who might have an elementary school and a middle schooler and a high schooler to all have the same day, so that there could be some child care that the high schooler could provide in the family to the younger child. So we'll try to accommodate with that piece as well. But for the most part, some of the changes that we want to evolve in our remote learning is more FaceTime with our teachers, especially at the elementary schools. I think our middle schools and high schools were used to that and did have a lot of FaceTime last year with their instruction, but I do think the elementary schools, the expectation is going to be for more FaceTime with live teaching. It's not just going to be going onto a board or not having a packet. You're going to actually be interfacing with your teachers on a more often basis. There's also going to be some office hours where students can talk to teachers with some of the problems or some of the assignments. And I think the teachers will have more capacity to put links up to help students. And part of this is a good opportunity because students are going to have to take a bigger role in their learning. And that's a great skill for them to have as well, to be responsible for their growth and their being accountable for their learning. So some of the assessments are going to be built in that will provide immediate feedback to students as to whether they understood or whether they need to study some of the topics more.
How about attendance for remote learners?
Attendance will be the same. We will have to take attendance for remote learners just as we would take it for students that come into school. That's going to be a piece, and we are going to have to address absenteeism. Students who do not sign in for remote learning will be marked absent, and the same results in terms of what the district is going to need: medical notes, being excused absences versus illegal absences are going to have to take place just like a normal school day.
You mentioned earlier that students would be given training on technology. How about parents?
Yes, I do think that parents are going to need some training in technology. It's very difficult to organize that right now and have large groups of parents coming in and receiving this training. So we are going to try to do a mix of things. So I cannot give you a blanket answer as to how we're going to be doing that, but I can tell you that we're going to hopefully have some links where we can provide some tutorials, especially on some of the software that we're using. Seesaw is one of the softwares that we're using in the Wingdale Elementary School. Some of the pieces like Quizlet and GoFormative, those are other pieces that we use throughout, and we'll hope that we get our technology people and our teachers to have some links that will not only just help the students but help the parents help their children as well.
Students are coming back at such different places socially and emotionally. What do we have in place to deal with that type of a situation?
Social and emotional learning, social and emotional development is critical. There's never been a time that we can look at and see what are the long-term impacts. This is so new to everybody. We have seen an increase in anxiety. We've seen an increase in depression. We also have had the Black Lives Matters movement and all of the protests, and students are going to have to talk about that and learn about that from the faculty, and we're going to have to work on that as well. In terms of social emotional development, we're going to need our counselors to help students. We're going to need our teachers, and some of the time on Superintendent's Conference Day will be to provide training for students, training for teachers on how to identify students who might be exhibiting anxiety or depression, and how do we help them. We want to reach out to parents and look at certain things that parents should be looking for to help us. We've recently hired another social worker who's going to can help equip parents, give parents resources, and give parents specific guidance along that. So with our 4 psychologists, our guidance counselors, and our social workers, we hope to equip our entire staff and work on some of these important issues as we move forward. None of these are single events. These are going to be things that we are going to have to keep at the forefront of our training and at the forefront of our professional development. So as we move forward, we address these issues on a consistent basis and try to make everybody feel as comfortable as possible returning to school.
Just jumping back now to the survey, why do families need to commit to their choice through January? Why not on a 5-week basis or a shorter amount of time?
I've already gotten multiple questions with that, and I understand your frustration. Parents have wanted to make a choice between a modified or a hybrid schedule or a full come in every day schedule. We can't offer those 3 choices for everybody. We don't have the staff, we don't have the rooms, we don't have the capacity to do that. We're trying to be as flexible as possible. One of the things that I need the information from the survey on is whether or not we can do the transportation or whether or not we can do a full return. So, and I'm just saying off the top of my head, from what I've talked to with the administrators and how far we've sketched this out, we would probably need about 20% of the parents and the students to be remote, to work from home in order for us to have a full return to school. We would need a certain number of parents who would drive their children to school so that we would have the buses open enough and safe enough to have our middle schoolers and our high schoolers coming on the buses that we currently have. So we're even looking at additional runs after the opening run for the high school and the middle school. If we can do a few more runs so that we can dilute the amount of students on the bus. That's why it's critical for us to have this information. And I know it's very hard for parents to make that. Can we change our mind after 5 weeks? So after 5 weeks, my son wants to go back to school. The students at school seem to be doing well and enjoying it. You're hearing some positives, you're hearing some negatives, but yeah, I'm ready to send my child back to school after 5 weeks. My answer to you is I don't know. If we can, we will. But here's my dilemma. If we've set up a schedule and we have 6 classes of 15 and they're all full, then if we get 8 more students who want to come back in 5 weeks, I won't have a classroom to put them in that won't be in violation of social distancing guidance that we need to adhere to. So it makes it very hard for me to switch and move as people want to switch and move. If we have a classroom that only has 12 and we could accommodate 15, sure, we would let that person come back as soon as they're comfortable in coming back, with the goal of having as many students in school as possible.
So right now the survey is due this Wednesday, August 12th. What will be the communication beyond that between you and the parents and the students?
Well, this is one of the pieces of communication. We put our plan out for everybody to look at for each school, and that's another piece of communication. The governor announced late last week that he expects all superintendents of schools or all schools to have 3 parent meetings, and we're going to schedule those later today. And those will be, right now I think we'll see what type of technology we'll use, whether we're going to do a Google Meets or whether we're going to do a phone in, where we can have kind of the community forums that you hear the local politicians or even the federal politicians do, where you can go online and listen to them, and then questions come up. But I think we'll try to do a Google Meets, and I'll try to field your questions, and you can listen in, and we can talk about some of the specifics, and I'll give you the best answers I have. And I know you're frustrated. I know, again, the ambiguity is difficult, but I have a very long to-do list, and everything on that list has to be done for us to open, including things like getting our N95 masks, getting our gowns, getting the ventilation systems proper up and running to our specifications, having the hand sanitizers ready to go, having the bus routes ready to go. There's quite a lot of logistics that needs to happen. So as much as I am trying to open, again, there are many things that could block or set the dominoes in motion, where we might have to go to a hybrid schedule, or we might have to go to full remote learning.
So how will you communicate when these meetings will be occurring?
I know you're sick of the phone calls, but I would do a school reach to everybody, and I would tell you when those meetings are. I would also post it on the website. It'll be on the link right next to the plans as to when our community meetings will be. We have to have 3 meetings prior to September 20th, and I'll probably pick 3 dates that I hope that will be at different times of the day, so that parents who are free during the day could listen in and talk, and parents who are free at night could listen in and talk. So we'll try to get 3 different days and 3 different times.
I believe that date is August 21st.
Okay.
And finally, when will parents know this is it and this is what I should count on?
That's a good question. I don't have an answer for you. I think I can give you the most definitive answer after our August 25th board meeting. Thank you for listening today. I hope I answered some of your questions, and at least you know where we're going with this.
If you have any other questions, please feel free to email either Mr. Tierney or myself, and hopefully we'll be able to give you more information. In the meantime, have a great day.